Doug, in what areas are small and mid-sized pharmaceutical companies still not devoting enough attention, maybe due to time or resource constraints? And what can be done to address that?
Well, I don't know. They're in a tough situation in many cases. We've been talking a little bit this morning about how maybe they have to wait until longer because of more of the uncertainty coming out of the FDA. In other cases, though, the state licensing has been an interesting over the past year. Our senior counsel at AmerisourceBergen Specialty Group spends a lot of time on the licensing aspect. Individual states, it's gotten to be a tougher process, not the other way. So while smaller to mid-sized pharma companies are trying to wait till later, I can tell you that as an example, they need to, in many cases, start earlier when it comes to getting the logistics of their licensing in place. So they've really been squeezed. So I don't know that they could do anything better. They're in a tough spot. As much as they can maybe have focused their areas onto not completely holding up the launch maybe, but just maybe addressing certain things that they're going to need in a launch scenario, being smart about what can wait, maybe what needs to be started on earlier in the process.
Are the relationships that smaller pharmaceutical companies have with key stakeholders, like prescribers, patients, and payers, any different than among larger companies? And in what ways might this affect commercialization strategies?
I think in general, certainly there are differences. One thing that comes to mind when you talk about prescribers, we've had a number of interesting conversations that I've heard a number of times this past year about the smaller to mid-sized companies as they're looking for products to commercialize. Some of them are specifically looking for drugs that don't require the use of a sales force, which then dictates a completely different way of interacting with a prescriber. So maybe it's no sales force, but they're looking for more peer-to-peer medical education opportunities, more telemarketing type opportunities. So it changes how they interact with prescribers in that case.
Despite the industry issues they face, why does this remain a positive time to be a small or mid-sized pharmaceutical company?
It is an exciting time because you do have more of that entrepreneurial culture. We like it. It's a lot of the client base that we deal with at ICS. But you certainly own a lot more. It's much more typical where you've got a small, focused team that can sit back at the end of the day and say, hey, we launched and I pretty much, with my core team, had everything to do or touched every aspect of the launch. So it's still exciting.
Are there any other best practices you can share relating to preparing for product launch, ensuring patient adherence, or protecting products against competitive threats?
Even though you may have more limited resources, the ones that seem to have the most success, even though it may be a smaller team, they do develop a core team, a core launch team that's involved in every facet of it. There's still a lot of planning that goes on. Just because you have to maybe hold off certain things until later in the commercialization process doesn't mean you stop the process altogether. So maybe it's just a little more disciplined and organized approach, but still keeping track of what I need to be working on 6 months, 9 months prior, what can wait, still planning, just maybe a little less spending along the planning process.
I see we're about out of time, Doug, but thank you for a great discussion today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us. We'll be back soon with another all-new episode. Until then, if it's on your mind, it's in the know.